Welcome, class. My name is Chris Sharp. I'm an instructor for the SWU 432 Social Policy and Services. And I'm also the director of the Office of American Indian Projects here at the ASU School of Social Work. And one of our partners, our strong partners for our social work program is Native American Connections. And I also sit on the board, so I have some pretty in-depth knowledge about some of the amazing things that NAC is doing in the community. So I invited our guest speaker, Stefanie Smith, and she's with the Native American Connections Supportive Housing Programs. Can you tell me a little bit more? And first off, welcome to the class. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your journey as a social worker?
So I am originally from Indiana, and I got my BSW at Indiana University, and then I got married and I moved to Germany, which put a little hold on getting my MSW, and we eventually came to Arizona. My ex-husband was active duty, so we came to Arizona, and once I got here, I was able to get my MSW. I got it through Indiana University, but for the record, I was accepted into ASU. And I've been working with NAC for 6.5 years now. They were supportive while I was pursuing my MSW, and I started off at one of our small properties there as a case manager and a property manager. And as the company has grown and our program has grown, developed, expanded, I just rose up into the program and found my way into a supervisor position.
And for those of you that aren't familiar with Native American Connections, they do have a housing department or a set of programs actually within housing. Some of you may be familiar with the services that they do with behavioral health and treatment of addictions. But there's a whole other side to NAC, but that are also integrated with the behavioral health services. So it's a really amazing approach that they do and model that they use and to address the needs in the community. Can you tell me about the housing programs at NAC?
Native American Connections has over 20 housing communities, mostly in Central Phoenix, and we have one in Glendale. The majority of those housing communities are what are called affordable housing. So it's geared more towards families that are working class, or maybe heard the term working poor, but definitely more family geared. And the other type of housing we have is it's called permanent supportive housing, and it is for people that have been chronically homeless and have some sort of disability and have low income or maybe no income. And then the third part of our housing is for youth aged 18 to 24. So we have an emergency shelter for youth, and then we also have transitional housing for that age group as well. So they get into emergency shelter, they can stabilize, get some income, and then they can transfer over to the transitional housing where they're able to stay for a longer period of time.
Great. I have some students I'm a field liaison. For those of you that are taking my class, I probably already told you that. And one of the things that I've noticed, Stefanie is a field instructor. She's a fantastic field instructor, and you can look on our system at the field office to look up how to apply for the NAC housing. One of the things that I noticed about the housing programs and what the students were experiencing were the type of model that you deliver in the housing. Can you talk about that and as your role as a social worker in the field of housing?
So in permanent supportive housing, like I said, that is for people who are chronically homeless, have some sort of disability. And in housing, disability is a myriad of long-term conditions. So that could be physical health, mental health, chronic substance use, developmental disabilities, so that it's a wide range, and that doesn't mean that they have to be on Social Security benefits. That's a big distinguisher there. And people with low income or no income, we are able to help them. So we use a model called Housing First, which is just that. We believe in getting the person housed and then wrapping services around them. So entry into housing is very low barrier by design. We don't look at rental history, we don't look at their credit. The background requirements, a lot of them have been removed. There's some things that are tied to our funding that we still have to look at, like if somebody was a sex offender or had a violent crime recently. But a lot of crimes that show up on background checks for this population are related to their homelessness, like trespassing or public intoxication. So we're able to look past that and know that if they're housed, those issues shouldn't happen anymore. And we don't require anybody to participate in services. We definitely engage them and provide the services, but nobody's going to get evicted because they don't want to meet with the case manager. But those services are always available, always provided. And one thing that is unique about NAC is that the case managers are on site. So they don't have to leave anywhere to go see their case manager. They don't have to wait for their case manager to get to them. They just need to come down to the office. And we're also staffed 24/7. So it's very secure in our properties, which is important to our residents. They tell us that's important. The residents can stay for as long as they need to stay. The average length of stay is 3 to 4 years right now. There's some people that need a couple years to stabilize and they move on, and there's some residents who will stay there for the rest of their life, and we're okay with that as long as they are maintaining their housing and not returning to homelessness. That's our overarching goal.
Okay, so in the permanent supportive housing, if a client is dealing with addiction issues, and if the client comes in and they may be, you may notice that they'd be intoxicated, they don't get kicked out of the housing, they still have a place to stay, and you offer them services and to address those issues.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's really, I think that's really important, because you can't really recover from anything or an addiction without stable housing. So I think that's a real effective model.
I agree. Same if somebody found themselves newly involved in the justice system. If they got sentenced to do 30 days in jail for something, they would go to jail, serve their time, and they could come back to their apartment and not lose their housing. Because again, it makes no sense to do that, to have somebody return to homelessness. That's really not helping the situation or the problem. Another big component about housing and why I think it's effective is that the use of emergency services decreases significantly, statistically significantly. We are able to connect people to primary care providers instead of using the emergency room or an ambulance as their primary care doctor. Their interactions with fire, police are dramatically decreased because we have someone there to help and be that first line of contact to see if we really do need to call 911, or maybe you don't really need to call 911 because your stomach is upset. Naturally, less contact with police because they're housed and they're not out on the streets, they're not in defense mode all the time. So there's many different facets of it that I think are effective, and it's a humane thing to do. It's the right thing to do.
It's definitely a social justice approach, and one of the things that comes to mind when I'm hearing Stefanie speak is we talked about competing values and the values of crisis response versus prevention. And so when people are housed, it's a preventative approach because you're saving money, like you said, at the fire department, you're saving money on police department, jails, prisons are expensive things in society, and so ER visits, a huge expense. So I think, that's a perfect example of a preventative approach. And just to wrap us up, so this question is kind of for our students. Maybe I'm asking on behalf of them. So if I'm a social worker that's about to graduate, what are some things that I should know about housing issues? Number one, housing issues. And number two, what are some opportunities to work in the area of housing?
So for housing issues, I doubt this is a surprise, but there's a lack of affordable housing in Maricopa County. So I think a lot of people, if they were connected to safe, quality housing, it would ease the burden on other systems and help their overall health. But housing is scarce, and affordable housing is even more scarce. And that's a barrier in our community, and no one can argue that. Outside of just the scarcity is the affordability. We see people who are doubling, tripling, quadrupling up in units so they can afford the housing. So then you have the issue of overcrowding, and sometimes people get evicted altogether because of that. So there's just like this cycle of homelessness going on. And for opportunities, there's lots of opportunities. NAC is not the only organization that does housing programs. Social workers are definitely needed in that field because we do have that holistic approach, and we're focusing on the person, not so much the problems going on. We can help make all of those connections because as social workers, that's what we do. We are aware of resources, we find new resources, we can get those people connected with that goal of keeping somebody housed, improving their overall health and well-being. So as a housing case manager, that's the overarching goal, is to maintain housing, help somebody maintain their housing, whatever those means are. So, like I talked about, like you went to jail, a housing case manager before has reached out to a judge, written a letter in support of saying if this person stays in jail much longer, they're going, by law, going to lose their housing. We are advocating, asking that you reduce that sentence so they don't lose their housing, and they did. The judge reduced the sentence, they were able to come back home, and no more criminal justice involvement since that one time. So those are ways that social workers are doing awesome things in the housing world.
Great. Well, I want to thank Stefanie for joining and sharing about some of the experiences in housing, social policy, specifically how housing policies can impact the clients that our students are going to be going out and working with. So thank you very much, and we really appreciate it. And I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day as well. Bye-bye.